In 1814, Walter Scott went on a journey around the rugged north coast of Scotland with the Northern Lighthouse Company. In Orkney, he heard a great deal of Norse tales, of sailors' superstitions, and he learned of the Orkney pirate John Gow. Later, this became inspiration for his own swashbuckling tale, The Pirate. So the story I'm going to tell today is also featuring pirates in the wild Orkney seas. And it seems only fair to tell it in the drawing room with this beautiful Chinese hand-painted wallpaper behind us. Wallpaper that was given as a gift to Scott by one of his cousins who worked for the mighty East India Company, which itself was no stranger to the ravages of piracy. This story is called The Magic Quern. Off the north-west coast of the island of Orkney and the island of Stroma, there was a great and vast whirlpool called the Swelkie. Now, it wasn't always there, any more than the sea was always salty, and thereby hangs an ancient tale. Long, long ago, in the land that we now call Denmark, there ruled a king, good King Frodi. Now, Frodi was handsome and kind and strong and wise, and he had a great many other virtues. But it was for none of these that he was famous throughout his land and far beyond. Instead, it was more for a special gift he had of being able to supply whatever it was that his people needed. Now, if there was a famine, he was able to find food to feed his people. If there was poverty, he found them gold. If there was a plague, he managed to supply them with medicines to cure their ills. And if they wanted for trade, he found them spices and rich goods with which to barter with his neighbouring countries. But strangest of all, if there was war, King Frodi brought his people victory and peace. Frodi's wisdom lay in never giving so much that either he nor his people became lazy. He only ever provided enough to fill their need. Now it became a great mystery to all the other kings and queens and sultans and pharaohs in the world how he managed to make this miracle. And so every year messengers and spies came to his court to try and find out his secret. And even honoured guests sitting at his table in his castle high above the cliffs over the sea, even they tried to bribe his counsellors to break their vows of silence against their king. Now one day, to the seas below that castle high above the cliffs, there came a ship. The ship was steered by the Sea King, Mysing the pirate. And it was he who sailed every ocean and fjord, plundering and pillaging other ships and all the villages that dotted the coasts like strings of beads. Now Mysing also wanted to know the secret of Frodi's power. And he came to Frodi's castle, but not as a notorious pirate, oh no. He came dressed in the disguise of a minstrel whose only pleasure, it seemed, was to be able to entertain the king and the king's court with his music. So Mysing was welcomed into the castle and he entertained very well. And he didn't take long to charm one of the little servant girls into showing him every room and every nook and cranny of Frodi's castle. High in one of the turrets that overlooked the sea, they came to a locked door, and Mysing felt absolutely sure that behind this door lay Frodi's secret. And so he waited. Every evening Mysing entertained the court with his music, and he waited patiently. He waited for some lack or some dearth in the land, because he knew that then King Frodi would find a way to supply the people's need. And his patience was rewarded in not very long a time, because there was a total lack of crops. All the crops failed. There wasn't a grain in the field, there wasn't any meal in any of the gurnals or kists. There was nothing to make bread, and the people and the animals began to grow hungry. Then one day Frodi went to that turret. He started to climb those stone spiral stairs, and behind him, unseen in the shadows, there crept Mysing, just like a shadow, a spider lurking in the dark. When Mysing got to the top of the stone staircase, he took a silver chain from around his neck, and on the chain was a key. He opened the door with a click, and the door swung open onto what was not, in fact, a chamber, but more of a niche in the turret wall overlooking the sea, because there were 3 walls and the 4th one was just a yawning gap showing the sky. The room was filled with the roar of the ocean below and the sound of the seabirds whirling between. But otherwise, apart from the king, it was completely empty, except for a giant quern stone in the middle of the floor. The 2 great flat millstones, one upon another, that were used to grind meal. King Frodi approached the quern, and he lifted his arms, and then he said, "O groti Quern, supply our need. For lack we crave it, lack, not greed. So grind meal, Quern, till sundown grind, that we may modest ample find." And then he moved his hands in 3 great circles over the top of the quern stone. And as if by magic, the top stone with its handle started to move slowly at first, and then spin all on its own. And out from the edges of the stones there started to sprinkle the first bits of meal, cornmeal. Then King Frodi bowed very solemnly 3 times, and moving backwards out of the door, he turned, left the key in the door, and went back down the spiral staircase to spend the day quietly on his own, until at sundown he would return, give another spell, and then distribute all the day's corn to his people. As soon as the king had gone, Mysing slid into the room, rubbing his hands together with glee, for at last he had found King Frodi's secret. He went past the milling quernstone, and he went to the great yawning chasm of the gap above the sea, and he looked down, and there below him was his sturdy ship, the Black Bow, and he signalled to his men to draw it right below the chasm. And then he went back into the room, and mustering all his strength, he put his shoulder behind the quernstone, and he pushed, and he pushed, and he heaved, and he heaved, and he pushed it to the very edge, and then toppled the still spinning quern down and down towards his ship, where it landed with a great thud on the deck, still turning. Then Mysing slid back out of the room and crept back down the stairs as silent as a shadow, out of the castle, down to the coast and into his own ship, where he told his steersman to go northwest as fast as they could. And then as they moved away, all that was heard was his unearthly voice laughing back through the sea mist, all that was left to thank King Frodi for his kindness. On the deck, in front of the milling grindstone, there was all of Mysing's pirate crew with open mouths, full of awe at what they saw. And Mysing rubbed his hands together again, and he looked at the millstone as all the corn came out around the edges. But it was not corn that he wanted, for the thing that was the most valuable that he had ever got his thieving hands on was salt. And it was his habit to go from one far-flung community and steal their salt, and then go to another community and sell it for the highest price. So now he moved towards the Quern stone in the same way that he'd seen the king. And he lifted up his arms and he said, "O Grote Quern, supply my need. For wealth I crave it, wealth and greed. So mill salt, Quern, grind and grind, till I may countless riches find." And then, as they all watched open-mouthed, the Quern stone slowed, then started up again faster. And now, out from the edges of the two milling stones, there came the first sprinklings of snow-white salt. Oh, how those pirates leapt up and down for joy at the thought of all the riches that were going to be theirs. They slapped each other on the back and they slapped their captain on the back. And Mysing was overjoyed. He was gloating of his triumph over the good King Frodi. By the afternoon, there was a great thick bank of white shining salt around the quernstone, and still it turned. By evening, the salt was up to the pirates' knees, and still it turned. And the next day, they were halfway to the Orkney Islands, and by this time, the deck of the Black Foe was covered in a layer of salt, and by the evening the salt was banked up like snowdrifts to every side, into every place that it could possibly go on the deck. And on the next day, Mysing thought that maybe he had enough now for his first cargo, and he decided that it was time to stop the Quern. Now he wished that maybe he'd heard the second spell from Frodi to stop the Quern, but no matter, he would stop it. He grabbed hold of the handle of the quernstone, but it spun and flung him off into a bank of salt. Then 3 of his ugly pirates jumped on top of the quernstone, and they were also spun off into the salt. And then they frantically started to chant whatever they could think of and make rhymes and even to pray to stop the quernstone, because now, as they approached the island of Stroma, the Black Foe was sitting very, very low in the water, and all the salt was draining down into the decks below. All of the pirates started to sweep and to throw the salt over the side as fast as they could. But as they approached Stroma, they realised that they were doomed. And so in a fury of mutiny, they picked up their captain, Mysing, and they flung him over the side with the salt. And shortly after that, there was a cracking and a splitting and a splintering of wood as the ship started to fall to pieces. And all the salt and all the pirates and the still spinning quernstone and the ship sank to the bottom of the ocean. And there it lies, the Grote Quern, still spinning out salt, and above it there is a great whirlpool. And that salt is the salt that savors all the oceans from Cathay to the Atlantic. and you can go there if you want to, if you don't believe my tale. You can take a boat to Orkney and another to Stroma. You can sail out to go and see the Swalkie. That is, of course, if you dare.